Movies, you probably watched them, and I have watched them. And I've watched quite a few over the last 3 months from January through March. And I was like, hey, why don't I just talk about all of the movies I watch? I want to talk about movies. Let me talk about movies. It's going to be 3 categories. So new releases, movies that I watched that were newly released. Then we're going to be talking about, movies that I rewatched. And we're going to be talking about the movies that I just watched for the first time watches. So let's get into it, starting with The Zone of Interest is a movie that has such a interesting impact. Just the way it leaves you off at the end is really interesting. And the sound design throughout is just so good, so incredible. Just the way it just haunts throughout the entire film. The reason why I say it's an interesting impact is, I know the movie, the intention of it was to kind of disconnect you from this world and who these characters are, and you're just watching these characters and you're just kind of observing it, and it's a really weird feeling. Like, while watching the movie, you feel weird about it, and so that's what I did like, that they were portraying it in that way. It was harder for me to personally be invested in it, where it's just watching stuff happening. And so I know, the point of the movie is to do that, and I appreciate it, but just for me, there was just points where I was like, I wasn't as invested in it just because I was just watching stuff happen. But it makes sense why a lot of people love it. The movie as a whole didn't click with me as much as I wanted to. Society of the Snow is a movie that's so excruciating to watch, but I loved it because of that. The way it portrays these intense weather conditions and such a intense environment that these characters had to suffer through, and you feel so bad. You feel just exhausted watching them. It's a very bleak and can be depressing film, but I enjoyed how throughout the movie these characters had that kind of spark of hope. That's just throughout the entire film, and the way that it respects the real life people that were in this tragic event was really great too. Dune Part 2, let me tell you, I love this. I love this thing. Dune Part 1, I'll get into that right after this, but this movie's so good. I watched it twice in IMAX. So this is kind of crazy that it's this is a new movie, but it's also a first time watch and a rewatch. So it kind of fits all 3 categories. So that's how you know this is really good. I think my favorite scene was the Harkonnen scene with Austin Butler. Just that arena scene was so crazy to watch. It's one of those moments in a blockbuster film that I was just like, yes, this is so great that I'm watching this on the big screen. And also, yeah, Austin Butler too. Such a freaky little guy, and I'm glad that he was included in this, or the way that this movie includes him is great, just because Dune Part 1, there's no freaky little guys in this. As well, Dune Part 2 doesn't have the, what's his name? The guy, Steven something. I'll put his name up here. I remember he had the little umbrella in the first one. Maybe he died, obviously. He probably died, but I kind of missed him, honestly. But, Austin Butler, he's so good that, if you take out the older guy with the umbrella, have more Austin Butler scenes, that's great too. This is a movie that just adds so much to the Dune lore, and I'm not someone who's read the books, so maybe this is the reason why I love it so much too, just because I've heard from other people who have read the books, and I've seen other people talk about it that have read the book, the way that this movie depicts stuff, isn't as accurate to the book. So I can understand that if there's slight disappointment or just the way things are executed, sure. But for me, as someone who hasn't read the books, I'm not sure if I will. Yeah, I love the movie. The action scenes, so good, so good, so good. Yeah, the film just, after watching the film, it just felt like I just left another world. It's crazy how movies are able to do that. I'm so glad that a movie on this scale was able to just transport me into this crazy world. I'm so glad that these movies are coming out while I love films too, just because there's certain trilogies Lord of the Rings and other great films and film trilogies that would have been crazy just to witness while they were coming out in theaters. And so this is one of those movie series that I'm just glad that I'm like, oh, I'm glad that I can say, like, yeah, I witnessed these movies in theaters. I was able to experience it. This is kind of off track, but I did watch Dune. I rewatched it before watching Dune Part 2. I know this is not a new release, so guys, please do not scream at me in the comments saying that I messed up the rules. I just want to talk about Dune because it's on my mind. I got that Dune mind going on. So, it's not as good as when I initially saw it in theaters, and I think it's just because it's one of those... It's a film that is more, or I guess compared to Dune Part 2, this one is more atmospheric, where it has this cool environment and you're learning more stuff. And so I think watching it in theaters was a way better experience. I still enjoyed it. I think this was my third time watching it, but it's been a while since I last watched it, and it wasn't as invested as I was originally. Now, even after watching Dune Part 2, I'm gonna be like, yeah, Dune is way weaker now. And then I watched Spaceman, the new Netflix film with Adam Sandler and Paul Dano. I thought, it has interesting ideas and the concept is interesting, but I just found the execution was lacking. Like it feels like we've just seen similar stuff to this, which is kind of a shame because it could have been better. And I think there's some stuff that could be rearranged or just kind of replaced. Like Adam Sandler is good in this movie, don't get me wrong. He's a good actor, and I think he can be really great in roles with, directors that use him well and utilize him well, especially like PTA and Punch Drunk Love and the Safdies and Uncut Gems. But with that, those are films where they let loose the Adam Sandler. Like those performances give into the unhinged and over-the-top energy that Adam Sandler's known for. This is more of like a subdued character, where this is a character who's in isolation and he's mentally going through it, and it's a more quieter role. And I think Adam Sandler does good, but he doesn't add as much as, I feel like there could have been more actors that could use the material and use it more interestingly. It has its moments, but I think it tries in the end to be it tries to have an emotional core to it, which I just felt like it just was kind of lacking. It just didn't leave me with much after all. And then I saw Perfect Days in the cinema, and what a lovely film, It's a film that's intentionally monotonous, where it's a character who's just doing his daily tasks. He's being a janitor, washing up the bathrooms and stuff. And so, it sounds boring, but it kind of gives you an interesting outlook and an interesting perspective. And I think that's what, great movies do, is that they put you into a perspective, or you're put in the shoes of a person. And this is one of those films where you're just kind of living the life of this guy. Leaving the film, it left me with an interesting outlook on that kind of stuff, where you see, appreciation for life and just within small things too, which I think is a great message. And then I saw Love Lies Bleeding. Yeah, the acting all around is really good. Dave Franco especially. He was just being silly, goofy, over the top. I loved it. It builds a really great environment, this kind of grungy, dirty, grimy 80s aesthetic. I really like that. But I just felt it was lacking in the script areas, where it's, the movie could have gone. I honestly wish it got a little bit deeper in the weirdness. Overall, it's engaging and it's a fun movie, but I just thought it could have gone in a more interesting direction. And then I watched Problemista just recently, and what an interesting and surprising film. I guess initially when I heard about it, saw the trailer, I think it was going to release in the summer, I was like, I kind of had that mentality, whereas it was like, yeah, it looks all right. Like, it just feels like it could be, kind of stupid or weird. I guess I'm not familiar with writer, director, and actor Julio Torres, so I wasn't really sure what the style was going for in the trailer. But then just recently, when I found out the movie was coming out in March now, I was like, oh, Yeah, I think I do. For some reason I feel like I should watch this movie. Um, and I'm so glad that I did. Julio Torres, his style just shines throughout this entire film. Just his unique and wacky way of just seeing the world and how he depicts it in this film, especially like his type of humor is so interesting, and the way he puts it into the film is really cool too. And it's just willing to be weird and has these surreal elements that initially like don't make sense, but in this world you're just like, yeah, like this works in this kind of environment that he's creating. Yeah, I guess one thing that I felt was lacking, or just one complaint that I found, was that the direction, I felt like it could have been more consistent. And then as well, there's some stuff where the direction is more focused on the humor rather than, emotional beats. But, it's also a first time directorial debut. So I'm really excited to see what Julio Torres comes with next. Just because he has such a unique voice, and I can see him doing crazy cool things in the future. All right, let's get into the rewatches. What did I freaking rewatch? What did I freaking rewind, play back? First one is Yee, Like a Cowboy. This is such a dense film, and there's a lot to appreciate with it. And it's one of those movies that you watch it, and then you watch it again. I would say watch it like many years later. Like give it at least a few years. The last time I watched it was about like 4 years ago, I think. And so watching it again, there's more stuff that I appreciated too. Just the way it depicts life, and it depicts all these characters at different stages in their life too. There's those elements too where you're just kind of seeing stuff is happening, and then you kind of see different perspectives from the characters and what they're dealing with and what they're struggling with. And as well, this is a long movie, so kind of spare some time, set out a day where you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to watch Yee, just because it's a long, dense film. I unfortunately, at the start of the year, I basically couldn't do anything. I was kind of bedridden, so I was like, okay, might as well just crank out this 3-hour long film. Then I watched Knives Out, which still one of those great movies where I can still have a fun time, still enjoy it, even after watching it many, many times. And I also showed it to my girlfriend for the first time, so it was also cool seeing like her reaction to it, just because it's such a fun movie, and it's a good movie to show people who haven't watched it as well. Like all the characters, the chemistry between all of them, the dynamics is so fun to watch. Yeah. Just love it. The Darjeeling Unlimited. I haven't seen this film in about like 6 years or so. I've forgotten how good this movie is. It kind of has a special place in my heart a little bit, especially like having a brother too. Like there's certain things that I kind of connected and related to a little bit more. It's one of his last films that kind of has the more emotional core to it, while still having this crazy style to it. I think this one, and then I think up until Grand Budapest, that was his final film that kind of has the emotional core to it while staying consistent with the style. His last few movies are still really good, but I think kind of miss and don't have that emotional core, or it's not as present like his films like this one. And so I think it's interesting watching this one after seeing his new films too, and kind of appreciating what he's done with it. And it's also cool seeing how he depicts India, like showing his interesting style in a different environment, I think is cool. And the acting, just all three of them. I think this is maybe Owen Wilson's best performance. It's really good. No Country for Old Men. I watched this shit again, dude. I love this movie too. This is such a great example of how a film can be greatly executed. Just because, on script, it is simple, and, but the direction is so good. The way, there's not even a score to this, and you're still like on the edge of your seat, like, oh no, the guy's gonna get him. It's just a great film, great acting. Love this movie. The Social Network. This is one of my all-time favorite films. I'm not gonna go too deep into this just because everyone knows how good this movie is. Soundtrack, boom, boom, boom. That shit rocks. Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, they put everything into this film score. Thank you for doing that, guys. That was pretty cool. That Jesse Eisenberg is just, he's a weirdo. He plays a weirdo. It's just a film that you're watching it and you can still be so engaged. The pacing, I think it's one of the best paced films I've ever seen, honestly. Just the way it cuts back, boom, boom, boom. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, this is great. So I watched Burning, and this is probably the fourth time that I've watched this film, and I'm not sure why I've seen this movie that many times, just because it kind of has dark subject material. It's not always like a quick, breezy watch, too. But I think it's just because the way I love the atmosphere that it creates. It's such a tense environment, and the way the music, the slow build of the music too, just throughout, you're just like, ooh, it's like a chilling watch. And as well, every line of dialogue counts, where you're just like, a character says something in the beginning, and then you kind of see the way it unfolds, and it's Steven Yeun's best performance. He's so good in this. So yeah, this is one, I'm going to give it, I'm going to make this up and say, this is my top recommendation of the video. Maybe there's a couple more throughout the video you'll have to see, of course. But this is going to be my certified official watch it please. And then I rewatched Spirited Away, one of Hayao Miyazaki's best films. And it's a film that, I haven't watched it that many times, I guess, because it wasn't really a film, especially with Hayao Miyazaki films. It was until like in my more like teenage years I got into Miyazaki stuff. Like, I never grew up on it. It's one of the very few Miyazaki films that I first watched as a kid, and I remember I didn't really like it as a kid. I just found it was like, oh, this is weird. Like, I was like 10 or 11. I was like, oh, this is weird. But it stuck with me, I remember too. And then I rewatched it like maybe a year ago, and I was like, wow, this is great. And then, rewatching it again within a year or so, it's still a great movie. The world building is insane. I love it. It just goes kind of full Miyazaki, where it still has this weird element to it. There's weird stuff going on, but it still, to its core, has that emotional impact. One of the best protagonists, Chihiro, is a great Miyazaki protagonist. And then another animated film that I watched, the Lego Movie. This is one of my favorite animated movies, and it's been so long. It's been a few years since I watched this, and I was expecting it not to be as funny. I was honestly like, yeah, I've probably kind of gotten a little bit older. Probably the humor isn't really my thing anymore. I was laughing throughout this entire film. This is a funny film still. I'll say it. It's still funny. I think if it did things a little bit differently, or if it didn't have as much care and thought into it, it would literally be like an insufferable movie. Like, it would be like one of the Trolls movies. I haven't watched the Trolls movies, so I don't know. It would be one of those. I haven't watched the Trolls movie. I know I can see what it looks like from a mile away. Let me say that. But it knows what it is, and it works with it, and I think it's great. There's so many great jokes in this throughout. Then I rewatched Uncut Gems. Love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies within the last 5 years. If not, it could be my all-time favorite. Adam Sandler is so over the top, and the Safdie brothers kind of harness that energy that Adam Sandler is known for and put it into this world, and it's great. I love how the film like feels like it's inside of its own world, but at the same time it's still in this reality. Like, there's just so much stuff in it that you feel like, oh, this is like almost like otherworldly, where you're like the opal shots where you're going in and out of the opal. I was like, damn, this is crazy. I remember the first time watching it, I was literally blown away. I was like, this is like cinema, guys. Yeah, just the chaotic energy is just so good. The music is so good in this. I love the music. And as well, this is a film that takes place in 2012, and I did, I've known that. I'm not stupid, but for some reason when I was watching it, like, it kind of clicked for me, like certain stuff that they add where you're like, oh, that's interesting that they added, and I was like, I'm kind of surprised that I didn't catch that first watch, because The Weeknd is in the film, obviously, and The Weeknd isn't like, in 2012 he wasn't a big deal. Like he wasn't like, I don't think he had that much music out, or he wasn't making the top Billboard charts or whatever. Like he's not as big as he is now. He's doing his concert. I thought he was kind of already a big deal in the world, like because he was trying to portray him as like a big celebrity. And I was like, oh, like because Howard just is like, who's this Weeknd guy? Like, what do you mean The Weeknd? I was like, oh, it's kind of funny because he's older. He's maybe out of touch. He doesn't know who The Weeknd is. But it's like, no, he's not. The Weeknd isn't a big celebrity. Like it's 2012. And I was like, that's kind of, how did I not pick up on that? And then as well, when Howard gets kicked out of the Weeknd concert, they play the song Swimming Pools Drank by Kendrick Lamar. And I was like, oh, that song came out in 2012. I was like, this is kind of cool that they were like, oh yeah, let's add this song for 2012. I don't know, I think that's cool. Then I watched Wallace and Gromit's The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Let me say, this thing still slaps. Like, it still is so good. I haven't watched, it's been maybe like 10 years since I watched this film, but it's still so good. I was a fan of Wallace and Gromit as a kid. I love the little short films. Those are great. And I was like, okay, like I do want to watch something silly. Like I was in the mood for something silly, and this worked. Like it's so over the top silly, but it still has that classic charm. There's so much stupid stuff, but it's like it works really well. I haven't watched all the Coen brother films, but I've seen a lot of them, and what I've noticed is that there's some that just really work with me, or I was like, yes, like the humor and the way it has this dark comedy element, and it balances it perfectly. I'm like, yes, like there's movies like Fargo, Big Lebowski, but then there's other movies where it's like, it's not like it's doing anything particularly different. It just feels off to me, where I'm just like, it's not as funny, and it feels like it's going too much, and it's like, doesn't feel that funny. And this is one of those movies. I rewatched it just because I saw people talk about it more online. I was like, oh, maybe I should give it a shot. It is not, it's just okay. Like it has its moments for sure. Like Brad Pitt and Frances McDormand especially, like they have great moments, and there's some great scenes in there. But just overall, I was just not really like engaged. I was just like, where's this going? And like the whole thing of the film is like, oh, it's pointless. Like these characters are stupid and they don't know what they're doing, and like there's no point to it. And it's like, I guess that's kind of, like you kind of would find that funny, but it's just, I don't know. It just overall, it just didn't really click with me. Then I watched Good Time, which is one of my all-time favorite films. I love the Safdie brothers, if you did not know that. And this movie it's a very special movie to me a little bit too, where I watched it for the first time back in 2018, and that was kind of when I was getting into film. I was heavily like trying to watch great films, and I was like, okay, I need to watch the classics. And a lot of my favorite films now are those films that I first watched in 2018 and I fell in love with, and this is one of them. And so I just love the way it's executed. Robert Pattinson, Benny Safdie, they just kind of submerge into their roles. And I know Uncut Gems is more polished. It has a bigger scope. It has a bigger scale to it. Technically, yeah, like Uncut Gems is better than Good Time, but I do still enjoy Good Time more. Like the reason why it's kind of staying a personal favorite, or like I like it a little bit more than Uncut Gems, just because I guess it has a little bit of scrappiness that you're just like, oh, these are kind of up and coming filmmakers. Like you still feel that with this film as well. I watched a documentary with them where there's pieces of the documentary that show them making the film, so I had a more appreciation to it as well. The music in this too is great. Just a film that I rewatch and I'm still engaged. I'm still thrilled. The French Dispatch. So, like I said before, Wes Anderson films, they've been kind of lacking in the emotional core department. Like they don't have the emotional core that his earlier films had, and this is definitely one of them. So it is lacking in that, but I still enjoyed this film. It's 3 separate movies, and I think going into it knowing like, okay, yeah, like this is three separate movies, I kind of had more of a fun experience watching it that way too. And I think my favorite out of the three might be the first one with the prisoner, who's also extremely talented painter. There's some of the best cinematography from a Wes Anderson film in some of the in that specific portion of the film, especially when it goes from black and white to the colored shots of showcasing the art. I was like, yes, this is great. And some of the one of the best shots I've seen in a Wes Anderson film is the shot, I'll put it up here, but it's when he's creating his art, and it's just a great shot. I love it. So now it's time for some first time watches. Barry Lyndon is one that I've been trying to watch for a while now. It's maybe like within the last 5 or so years, I want to say I've actually like started it, and then just been like, after a few minutes, like, I don't know if right now is the best time to watch it. It's been a long process of finally trying to watch this movie, but at the beginning of the year, I was stuck in the house and for a few days, and I was like, hey, I can crank out a 3-hour film now, and I'm really glad that I watched it. I think it's one of those films that maybe it would be fun to watch in a theater too, just because I was watching it alone, and I found it amusing, but I think in a packed theater with other people finding it funny, it would definitely help as well. As well, the cinematography, it works. It still holds up so well. I love the slow zooming in and out. There's so many great shots that just show the gorgeous scenery and just slowly zoom into the characters, slowly zoom out. I was like, yes. Yeah, a very, very great film. And a great thing that really encouraged me to watch it was actually a 21 Savage edit to this film. It's, I'll link it down below. It's great. And I've been trying to watch Barry Lyndon for years, and then I saw that, and that's literally, like, I'm not joking. I was like, oh, I should watch Barry Lyndon. Like, I really want to watch it now. I think that's the way. Now. Movie trailers, they can be good. But if you edit like a fire song to a movie and it like works so well and goes hard, like, that's what's going to make people want to see it, maybe more, So I've been trying to get more into Akira Kurosawa films, and I've been loving most of them for sure. But this is definitely one of those films that hold up really well, and I was kind of surprised. I am a fan of older films, don't get me wrong, but there is also a certain quality to them that it's harder to get me engrossed. It's more of a personal thing than anything. Like, I appreciate older cinema, and there is a bunch of older movies that I love. But at the same time, there is times where I'm watching an older movie and it's like, there's something about it, just the way sometimes there's limitations at that time period. It's not to say that the films back then are worse than films now. I don't want to get into that kind of debate. But High and Low is a film that feels like it could have come out today. Like, it has the source material, just the way it's presented, its storyline. It's really well acted, and it's interesting how it presents its information. It has a lot of tense moments. It's super engaging too. Yeah, it's one of my new favorite Kurosawa films, and this one is going to get a big fan of films, recommends this movie a lot. You should go check it out. This is number 2. Yeah. Porco Rosso is one of the few Hayao Miyazaki films that I hadn't seen before, and I'm really glad that I watched it. It's such a vibe movie. It's, out of all Miyazaki's films, this is the most vibey, where you're just kind of going with the flow, and it's great. The animation is great. The flying sequences are great. There's a lot to love about it too. The music is great too. Porco Rosso is a great little pig guy, and he's so charismatic. The Adults is one of the most underrated films of last year, and it's one that I missed as well. Yeah, all I knew about it really was that Michael Cera's in it, and he does a Tony Soprano voice. It's a very heartwarming film, and even though it doesn't have like a prominent style and tone to it, but what I think really sells it is the acting. Michael Cera's great. Sophia Lillis and Hannah Gross all play these siblings, and it really shows their great chemistry together. Like, it's a very raw and authentic portrayal of siblings and their relationship. It just shows all of it, the good times, the bad times, and the silly times. There's a lot of funny moments in this. It's a short and sweet film, but it definitely has a great impact. Sexy Beast is another film directed by Jonathan Glazer, who directed The Zone of Interest, and I was really interested in checking this film out because I just saw The Zone of Interest. Yeah, I know you're laughing really hard right now, so I'll take a break for a second. Yeah, it has a great dark comedic tone to it. But I think overall, I wish it had a more kind of flair, or more of a style to it. There wasn't much of a long-lasting impression on this one. You know, I enjoyed it. I was engaged. I had a lot of fun watching it. Ben Kingsley is great. His on-screen presence is so just like kind of freaky and terrifying. He's just yelling and swearing at everybody. But at the same time, it's very funny too. Cliffhanger is a movie that I don't typically seek out. I'm not typically trying to watch older, cheesy action movies of the 80s and 90s, but I do find them a lot of fun. And me and my friend were like, okay, why don't we just watch Cliffhanger and have a fun time? And it was a fun time. Sylvester Stallone, he has a silly voice. You know, he can't help it. I'm not making fun of that. But in this movie, just because of its unintentionally goofy one-liners, it just makes his voice makes everything funnier. Yeah, and then me and my friend afterwards found out that it was directed by the same guy who did Die Hard 2, and we're like, yeah, it makes sense. Because it just feels like this guy is trying to do Die Hard, but in the Rocky Mountains. So if that seems like you would want to watch it, yeah, check it out. I can't believe I missed out on seeing The Iron Claw in theaters. This is another great film from 2023, and I think, you know, it's one of my favorite films from last year as well, which I didn't put it in my video because I hadn't watched it then. This is just a gut-wrenching film, and I'm glad that I kind of went into it blind. Like, I didn't really know the true story of the Von Erich brothers, and that definitely helps with it, where it's just like, wow, this is crazy. And the way they presented it was really great too, and it felt very respectful to the Von Erich brothers. Emotionally, just packs a punch. All the acting's great. Just left me with a lot to think about. Cure is a film that just has a very eerie, intense, and creepy atmosphere, and I loved it for that. It's a crime thriller that presents its information in a really interesting way. It's not trying to hide information and pieces of the puzzle. It kind of gives you little pieces here and there, and you kind of know what the mystery is, but that's not really the point of the film. Yeah, I was just completely submerged in this eerie atmosphere that the film creates. I've been trying to get more into older Asian cinema, so this was really good to get into. Then I watched The Dirties because I've been recently getting into more of Matt Johnson's stuff. He's a filmmaker from Canada, if you did not know. He directed Blackberry, which I saw last year, and I thought that was a really great film too. And I recently was just kind of watching podcast stuff, and then I stumbled upon his podcast, and he was talking about his show that he did, Nirvana the band, the show, and then I started watching that, and I was like, oh, this is really funny. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the way he approaches filmmaking. His films and TV shows feel authentic to his vision, and that's what I like about this. And The Dirties feels authentic to his vision. I really appreciate what he was trying to get at in this film, but presenting this kind of dark subject matter and having it be focused on this main character was really a bold choice. I just think it didn't really stick the landing for me throughout the whole film. I think the beginning and end are really strong. Just what was in between was interesting, and I like the found footage style of it. It just didn't really engage me. Didn't feel like it was doing anything for a big chunk of the time. But I'm really excited to check out more of this stuff. I haven't watched Operation Avalanche. That's one that I want to give a go. Then I watched Blowout. I found it really interesting the way that it shows filmmaking in the 80s. It's a film that if it came out now, it would have just been like over and done within the first like 20 minutes, just because I'll tell you about the film a little bit, how it sets up. It's this guy, John Travolta, and he plays a sound recordist. But I like how he calls himself like, yeah, I'm a sound guy. He doesn't have a professional name to him. Maybe it's because he's just getting used to it, or it's a new thing that people didn't really know about. But he's not calling himself a sound recordist in this film. He's not being professional with her. He's just like, yo, I'm the sound guy. People are like, so what do you do? And he's like, I'm a sound guy. Yeah, the sounds in the movies, I do that shit. It's like, oh, okay, what? I like how he just records sounds. He's like, I'm bored. I'm going to go outside and record some sounds because I need something. I don't know what I'm going to do. He also, he's the Foley guy too. He's not just a sound record. Yeah, I guess he's a Foley. So he's not, sorry. He's not a sound recordist. He is like a Foley sound effects, Foley sound effects guy. I don't, he's doing all of it, so maybe it makes sense now. Maybe I'm the one who's being stupid. He should be called the sound guy. Okay. He goes to record some sounds. He's like, I'm bored. I need to get some sounds for my film. I don't know what I'm going to get at. Let me just record some sounds, see if I come up with something cool. He's recording some sounds, and then a car crash happens, and it turns out to be a very important person who dies in the car crash, and he records the sound. And so the whole thing is like, oh, like, was it just a car crash? Like, was he just, was this important guy just kind of driving, and then he was drunk and then crashed? Or did one of his tires get intentionally shot? Because the sound guy, John Travolta, records a sound and it sounds like one of the tires popped. So I feel like if it came out now, it would just be John Travolta, and then like he'd be like, oh, like, what's that? Pulls out his phone, records the whole thing, mystery solved. Because the whole movie, everyone's trying to be like, oh, like, it sounds weird, like there's no video proof, so we're not sure what that sound could be. Are you sure that's the sound of a tire popping? It could be something else. So that's the whole film. It's more interesting than that. I'm kind of summarizing it in a more boring way. I think it's really interesting the way it shows 80s filmmaking, as he's super into like the sound, and as well he's shooting on film, and he's making his own stuff, and it's like, whoa, this is kind of cool. And as well, I love the split diopter shots in this. I've been seeing more stuff online about Brian De Palma and the way he loves to use those certain shots. And especially the owl shot, I was like, oh, this is cool. There's a lot of moments in this where it's like, oh, yeah, this is cool. I like how they did that. The ending, too, I was like, whoa, that's pretty bold of it. And the last film I'm going to talk about is Tar, about Lydia Tarr. Cate Blanchett as Lydia Tarr was really good. Not just pretty good, it was really good. Yeah, her character is interesting because she's kind of framed as a more cold and distant person, and she only cares about, good work and good effort, and she's trying to be the best of the best. But then what I liked about it is that throughout the film, you see little bits and pieces of just kind of Cate Blanchett bringing out the humanity from this character and showing her more in a vulnerable state, which I think is interesting. I liked it a lot, for sure. Especially the orchestra scenes are great. I just found that I felt like it could have built up to something more or something greater. Maybe that's just because that's the way I'm used to seeing these types of films, where like, oh, they're gonna like snap, yo, like this is gonna be crazy, yo, there's gonna be some more like consequences, or like something crazy is gonna happen. Yes, there is little bits and pieces of that. I understand why they wouldn't want to go that way too, so I respect the direction. I guess I was just waiting for something more to happen. Yeah, I like the ending. I'm not bashing the ending. I like the end credits song. That is pretty cool too. And yeah, I like Tar. That's what I'll say. So those are all the films that I watched this few months. Let me know if you like these videos and if you want to see more of these videos. And as well, let me know what you're watching. What have you been watching? What are some great films that you're like, hey, maybe you should check these out? Or just let me know what's going on. Yeah, let me know, just let me know, and I'll know.